Good afternoon. This is Life Along the Merrimack, a weekly podcast where we talk about the health and history of the Merrimack River. Today, our guest is Charles Tontar, who is a city councilor, has lived in the community for quite a long time, and we want to talk about the river and perhaps some city issues. Charlie, thank you very much for being on the show.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
You know, when I talk on this show with a variety of people, the consensus is that sometimes the river is getting dirtier, not cleaner. That doesn't mean it's polluted. That doesn't mean the fish are having four heads. But where you stand as a city councilor, do you hear dialogue like this in the city council chambers? Like, gee, what can the city do with the other communities on the river to make it a little cleaner, or to come up with a plan that it will be clean?
We've had some discussion. The council just discussed what's before us in the agenda, and we have had it. I think Councilor Khan a couple of years ago put a communication in to the council on CFOs, on combined combined sewer outflows.
Yeah.
I get it from the boating community more so than discussions just last week. There are a group of people who row on the Merrimack River, and now is the season to get out there. So of course, when you row, and I rowed in college, you're down close to the water, and you get water splashed in your face all the time. So you're really intimate with the water. So rowers tend to be very, very concerned and interested about the quality of the water, and especially with the sewer outflows from upland.
And that brings up a great story. Well, great because you lived through it, but it involves you. I believe in the early 70s, you were on the crew team, perhaps from George Washington University.
Georgetown, but I'm not insulted.
Georgetown University. And as I have heard the tale, your team came up to the Merrimack River and you, Lowell, was hosting. And I think you were all set to do brilliant things. And then I think your shell turned over. Do I have that correct, Charlie?
Well, you get a lot of it correct. It was just during the summer, and I wanted to work out in the summer, so I actually arranged with a rower from U Lowell and their coach, and he went out and coached us, and we were in a pair. And I had never rowed in a pair before. I had always rowed in an 8, and I had always really tied. When you row, you're on a sliding seat, and you tie your feet very tightly into. It gives you better control, better able to row. And I just tied in, and the fellow oarsman caught what a crab. It's called a crab when the oar catches you and lifts you out of the boat and it flips the boat over. And so I was underwater tied in. So I had to get out, and it was fine. I did have to go to Lowell General and get a tetanus shot.
Well, if that was 70 or 71 or maybe a little.
It was.
So that indicates in the 70s that people were quite aware of sewage problems, and just like you going in, they didn't want you back in the shell. They wanted you over getting shot and getting cleaned up.
Right. I'll tell you another story, Dyke. My mother grew up in Lowell, and when she heard, she was in her 80s when I moved to Newburyport, and she heard I was going to live a block and a half from the Merrimack River. She was shocked and she was aghast. Right, because in Lowell you tried to get as far away from the Lowell from the river as you could. I mean, the same was true in Lawrence, Haverhill. The better communities were up on the hills because that's something worth noting. I mean, we all know what an asset the Merrimack River is, but it's also a threat. It's a threat in what was it, 1937 hurricane?
Yeah, 36. I have pictures.
36. Yeah, right. The flooding was just phenomenal in Lowell. I mean, growing up in Lowell in the '60s, which was 30 years after it happened, they had markings all over the city where the high water marks were, and which was just stunning. It's considered that it went up that high. The same, I think, was true all down the river into Newburyport. That was, I hope, once in a 100-year event. So
yeah, the flood of '36. I have a show that I put on Zoom and have about 40 slides, and one of my slides is from Manchester, New Hampshire, in 1936, and that went way up, and it flooded the Amiskig Manufacturing Company, which is the largest employer in town, of course. Now, Amiskig was on its way out of Manchester by 1936, but this put an end to it. And even up in Maine, and the Kennebec and Androscoggin, they had tremendous floods. So, as I agree with you on that one, that, I hope they don't come along too often.
Right, it can happen, and but there were. I mean, I remember, in Lowell, proximity to the water meant rats and
Yeah.
other problems associated, plus the stench of the river. All right.
Mhm.
I mean, you didn't. When I was a kid, we did not go swimming in the Merrimack River.
Mhm.
Right, you just didn't do it. Mostly because of the manufacturing, the textile manufacturing associated chemicals that went in the water and that sort of thing, and what the Clean Water Act revolutionized the Merrimack
Yes.
River. All right, really, it made it possible to live right. I mean, now the homes along the Merrimack are $1 million homes, right?
Mhm.
Whereas even 30 years ago, you'd be hesitant to buy in the banks of the Merrimack. And
Well,
actually, I just want to add one thing
yeah.
because it's been on my mind. With the American Relief Plan that just passed,
Mhm.
the Congress and President Biden signed. Newburyport is going to get $5.3 million in aid.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
And the upstream communities are going to be getting, in some cases, more aid. It's allocated by a formula, but it's formulaic, but it's based on population, broadly
Mhm.
speaking. I'm hoping that some of those communities can use some of their funds to help address their infrastructure problems that results in the effluents coming down here.
Mhm.
That's what I'm hoping. We have very little influence on that, but I would hope that they would do that.
Well, there is good news. Even before that, the city of Manchester up in New Hampshire, which is the largest polluter with their discharges, they agreed with the state and feds. They will start a $130 million program to improve their sewage treatment plant. Now, that's over 20 years, and it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
It's good news, because to think that they're going to start separating the rainwater from the sewage, and they won't have these
Overflow.
you
right.
mentioned, is a
Outflow,
big
yeah.
deal. So, and the federal authorities also have assent agreements with Lowell, Lawrence, and Haverhill that they're on call to start fixing up their sewage treatment plants. So, as you say, maybe some of this money coming in from the federal side can be part of the package that helps improve those sewage treatment plants.
And then the administration in Washington is talking about another infrastructure program that to follow this one, $2-3 trillion program. We'll see what comes out of Washington. So there is hope. I mean, as you are well aware, I mean, everyone knows what the problem is. What we don't, and we also know what the solution is. What we don't know is where the money is coming from.
Yeah.
And it's not going to come locally because the communities that would have to spend the money just don't have those kind of that kind of revenue. So maybe the feds will help.
Charlie, at one point several years ago, there was a project called Waterfront West that the CARP development team wanted to put in down between the Old Black Cow and Michael's. And I know you sat in on many meetings about that. And that would have brought perhaps 200 condos and perhaps a 90-room motel there. Where does that stand?
I think it's dead. I think the council made it clear. I think there were clearly 10 votes opposed to New England Development's proposal. I think that, I mean, it's a tough development because of its location. Even compared to when NED bought it, there are a lot more controls from FEMA in terms of water, in terms of flooding. And, the design that they proposed was going to have parking on the first level. All right. So all the buildings were going to be built up above one level. And the retail, back, 30 years ago, or 25 years ago, the concept for the waterfront would be to have retail on the first floor and residential above it. That you can't do that anymore. That's not possible. So and I think that circumstance is what drove the height and the density of the proposal to make it financially feasible. And I think the consensus certainly was my view, and the consensus on the council was that was just too much development. That it would change the character of Newburyport too much.
Do you think we'll ever get a motel, Charlie? I mean, it comes up now.
I'd love to get a hotel. Again, it's up to New England Development. I know that we were basically the deal was they'd agree to a hotel if we allowed the density of development, and we basically said no. All right, so we said, look, it's not worth it for the city to get a hotel at that cost. All right, so basically the city's waiting to see how they will respond. Again, I'm just speculating here. Last time there was uncertainty in the market, which is 2007, 2008. New England Development kind of backed off for a whole 10 years. Coming forward, it's probably too early for us to speculate what's going on, what's going to happen with the pandemic and the economy, and to see. But they're certainly not rushing with anything. Rushing on. I mean, the only thing they did do is they, terminated the agreement with Plum Island Roasters.
Yes, that drew its own amount of energy, I've got to say.
Well, it did, and you wonder. I mean, you wonder. Yeah, well, I'm not going to, whether or not that was potentially in response to the council's action, because all right, you're not going to do what we want, so hey, we know you like it, but tough luck.
And one of the city councilors, he was, for the establishment.
Right. Yeah. So
you've been on the council close to a decade, Charlie. What do you enjoy about being on the council? There's a lot of issues going back and forth. And for listeners, I cover the city council for the Daily News, probably from about 2010 to 2017. So I got very close to Charlie's brilliance, I must say. But how have you enjoyed the last decade, Charlie, if you had to look back on it?
Well, I mean, I do. I'd say that what I've enjoyed the most, quite frankly, is I'm going to be honest here. I know what I'm supposed to say is I enjoy helping people out, which I do. But what I think was, I don't want to say it surprised me, was but I do want to but I was pleasantly surprised at working with city officials, working with department heads, working with public employees. I mean, across the board, from the very top to the very bottom. When I was chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, I worked very closely with the finance team. Ethan Manning and and Joe Brennan and Julie Langueduc, and they, I mean, it's a top that, I mean, and residents don't see that, right? They don't, and now I'm chair of the Public Utilities Committee, which deals with water and sewer, and I'm dealing closely with Tony Fenari, but also the water and sewer managers, and again, these people are top notch. Right now, they are examining the water and sewer infrastructure, which of course is over 100 years old, and a all over the country, it's a problem. And so working with those, I mean, that has been, and that's fulfilling. And so if there's any message that I've learned after 8 years on my 8th year of the council, is that there's some very dedicated, competent people working for this city, and they have the best interest of the city in mind, and they work hard.
Well, talking about City Hall, Charlie, there's going to be a vacancy at the end of Donna Holliday's term. Are you thinking that you might make a run for mayor here in Newburyport?
I'm still leaving that open. I have to say, I was a little knocked off my feet, knocked out of balance by the pandemic. I always have thought that my weakest thing as a politician is social media, which I just don't promote that myself very much that way. And I always thought my strongest point is talking to people. And the pandemic has kind of taken that away. So I think it's an interesting year. I think that there are 2 candidates who have stepped forward. I know Bill.
Sean Reardon is one, as I understand it.
Yeah, Sean is one, and then Warren Rousseau is the other person who stated that he would run. There's a lot of speculation, all right, about other people. It's sort of interesting. It's my own view is it's one of those positions where if you paid any attention to what the mayor does, then you'd have to be nuts to run. It's sort of a requirement, because it is a lot of work.
We're only a small city of 18,000, but
right.
Spend a lot of hours in City Hall. There's a lot of activity going on. Mayor Holliday does a lot of work, a lot of good work, and so does the council. So I agree with you on that point.
Yeah, and I mean, it is, and I think to run, and I'll say this in Sean's behalf, I think he really wants it. All right, and I think that's an important characteristic. Yes, all right, you in your gut, you really want to have to be mayor, and that was certainly true of Donna, and also people who ran against her. All right, we've been fortunate in such a small city that people have been willing to step forward.
Yes,
over the last decade.
Well, one of the people who had announced he was going to run for mayor, a guy named William Shuttleworth. He's an educator, lives in town, of course, and he decided he wasn't going to run for mayor, but he made a few criticisms of the town, or at least he was saying this is what has to be improved. So let me ask a couple about these things. He said that Newburyport should improve itself as a destination for tourists and businesses. What do you think of that, Charlie? Is the town doing enough to be a destination spot?
I think that's an interesting question, because, and the reason I find it interesting is what we hear a lot from residents is that there is a tension between downtown and neighborhoods. That traditionally the city, that is, the city council and the mayor, have paid too much attention to downtown and not sufficient attention to the neighborhoods. I've never viewed the city as in that way. I don't think it's an either or question. I don't see it the same way Bill does in terms of promoting ourselves as a destination. I think that our downtown area is a tremendous asset to the city. And that includes, people coming in, day tripping. I prefer, I did a study over 20 years ago for the Parks Department on rail trails. And
that's a great success, though. So
great success. But
someone did the right thing on that one.
Well, but what I was studying is the economic impact of rail trails. And what we concluded is that if people stay overnight, it has a strong economic impact. If it's just day tripping, it's not so much of an economic impact. All right, so you have trails where people will stay, and hotels and restaurants benefit, and then you have places that are just day tripping. And so we are solidly at this point a destination for day tripping.
That's true.
And I think the way I think about this and why is that. I'm not so worried about our restaurants downtown. I think that they have been they will survive the pandemic. and maybe even improve. And we have these parklets that we're putting out. It's to be hoped that that will be permanent. And I'm also on the license and permit committee. We're discussing
Yes.
making that a long-term. I think that will enhance the downtown. But before the pandemic, I was concerned about the retail sector in Newburyport, and also a little. I mean, the sort of forgotten sector, which is what's on the second and third story. The psychologists and accountants and lawyers. We have what makes, I think, one of the things that makes Newburyport so unique is that we have this old time downtown, right? Mm-hmm. It's not quite the downtown that maybe you and I know from growing up in the 50s and 60s, right? Mm-hmm. Before there were malls. But we also see that malls are closing down. I just read an article last week, and this is not necessarily good news for Newburyport, but a lot of the mall shops, all right, that a lot of the retail stores that we all recognize they want to locate in communities now. Right, they want these chain stores that have been all over the country, Banana Republic, et cetera. Right, they want to come down and locate in downtowns because that's what people want to see. All right, that's where people want to live, and that I think is our challenge in Newburyport is keep it vibrant, which means a mix of restaurants, drinking establishments, retail, and second and third floor. Businesses and keeping that mix vibrant. I think the weakest link right now is the retail piece, and because and that's because of the internet, right? And so that's. Well,
let me ask you another question. And again, this is Life Along the Merrimack. This is a podcast. Dyke Hendrickson. This is Charlie Tontar, a city councilor. We're on once a week, and we talk about the health and history of the river. And Bill Shuttleworth, who's a smart guy, also in this article in the local paper said, we have to make sure we get more affordable housing. Now, that is a wonderful goal. It can be hard to do, though. People want to live in Newburyport right now. And if you build a house, you can sell it for a top dollar. Right. Can we do enough? Should we get more affordable housing here in town?
Yeah, I think one of the things is we face some real restraints in trying to do that. So for instance, I supported the 30B project around the railroad station. I support its expansion. That's Minco is undertaking. They'll be coming forward with plans. Whether or not that is affordable as we understand it. I mean, I think the studios are around 1,900, one bedroom, 2,400, 3-bedroom, 2,900 in Marquette, but there were 20% of them because city action are affordable. There was a lottery for and I think we have to take every opportunity available to do that.
The community is on notice with the state that we have to get to 10% affordable, or else they're going to start looking at low income.
That's right.
Affordable. And
I mean, we haven't. I mean, there really hasn't been construction of public housing since the post-World War II era. All right, but one of the things we have in Newburyport is we have a very, very limited amount of property. I mean, I mean, we just and then the other force, the market force, I think you were alluding to, is incredibly powerful. It's like trying to lean against it is like standing on the ocean when a tsunami is coming in, right? I mean, and so what I think we're trying to do is we are reconsidering zoning in and that's another place where we can look. For instance, what used to be called the in-law apartments, right? Loosening up the restrictions. This is a hot debate, all right, because it means it will mean denser communities. My position on the council has always been sort of an anti-development in the neighborhoods position.
But you are a builder, Charlie.
Yeah,
you like building.
Yeah, I do like building, but I do like buildings in the right place. And one of my arguments for the 30B in the railroad station is put more density in certain places so that you can preserve the openness in other places. But I do think that we have to consider whether or not given the housing market, whether or not that's the best strategy. I mean, one of the things that I found extremely interesting was, 3 years ago when we did the master plan, I was on the economic development subcommittee, and we had a consultant do a survey of businesses, and the number one concern they had then was the lack of affordable housing for their workers.
Yes.
So if you think about it, if you can't hire workers because workers can't live, all right, in your community, that's going to kill your business, right? And so that's really a major concern.
One of the smaller concerns has popped up recently. This isn't a city, this is a federal, but there have been a lot of letters about we lost a mailbox on Green Street right across from City Hall. And I think everybody, not everybody, but many people who are mailing things will go down there, put it in and get off. And now they have to get out of the car, go all the way over the place.
Right.
I've seen more people being cranky because I say, why couldn't they leave the mailbox in so we could put our mail there? Now, that's not a city issue. That's a post.
Federal, the city council.
Have you heard about that one, Charlie?
Well, oh yeah, the city council, we unanimously passed a communication to the postmaster in Newburyport, and also we copied it at my suggestion to the congressional office to try to get it returned. When this happened, it happened last August, September, sometime around then. I did a little research on it. This is happening nationwide. It's a result of phishing, all right? And I'm probably gonna be wrong on the amount, but if what people were doing is using phishing lines and with sticky material, and they pull mail out. And for
the postcards I write to my sister are not very interesting, and there's no money in them.
No, but I'll tell you what, there is money if you produce a box of mail, as much as $30 to $40 a box. That's what the post office, there was a whole bunch of testimony and public testimony about it. And so, I think, I don't think that's a particular problem in Newburyport. I haven't heard or seen or any reference to that problem in Newburyport. It is a problem in Massachusetts. There are communities in Massachusetts where it's occurred. And of course, I think, in the one size fits all department, the Postal Service said, okay, we got to eliminate these.
Yeah, right.
So we'll see. We haven't gotten a response.
Well, life is generally good in Newburyport, but another disappointment that I felt this year was when C&J bus stopped using the parking lot and stopped using the depot. Now, as you might know, and maybe you've said, this was one of the great deals on the North Shore. You park, you can leave it there for a week. You don't pay for it. It's still there. I mean, this was a wonderful thing. Could the city have kept that, or was this a private property issue?
C&J wanted to locate across Story Avenue.
Yeah, I've heard that. I can't figure it out, but yes, I have.
Where we considered and then rejected putting a fire, moving the West End fire station. Yeah, and that, there are restrictions on the use of that property. I mean, it's a conservation area. It's a conservation area with the Little River, and so the city was not willing to do that. And C&J told us pretty directly, look, I need more parking. If I don't get more parking, we're moving.
Oh, I see.
So they moved. I don't know. They moved up to is it Seabrook?
They did
107.
I haven't. Yeah, I flew at it. I mean, I parked there. I hated to be going the wrong way. Ended up spending $36 for parking. It's a lot different, but we're almost.
Oh, so they're charging for parking there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrible. Yeah,
it is, and it's only $2 or $3 a day now, but it'll go up to be sure. But we only have a couple minutes, and I just want to make this question clear. I've asked it a little bit. Incidentally, again, this is Life Along the Merrimack, 96.3 radio. Cable TV, Channel 9. I'm with Charlie Tontar, a veteran city councilor. You said you might be thinking about running for mayor. What are you thinking about? What issues would make you say, I want to run for mayor?
what issues would be. Well, the first, and actually, there are a lot of issues. One would be what we already talked about, is I think we're going to have an opportunity over the next 4 years with federal assistance, with federal money, to begin addressing the infrastructure.
Mhm.
That is important
That's a
to
good
me.
point.
I think it's important to the city. Secondly, I think maybe some of that, I don't want to commit, but we have to come to terms with a lot of the resiliency issues.
Mhm.
With whether it be protecting the water system or the wastewater treatment facility, but also Reservation Terrace out in Plum Island.
Yes.
We have to. I mean, we have to have a real conversation about that and try to begin thinking about how the city could confront the next 30 or 40 years. I think that's important. And we've also mentioned the third issue that I think is critical, which is making sure our downtown continues to be vibrant. All right.
And I think the point you made is good. There has to be housing that people can live in, that they can walk there. Not everybody can drive 30 miles from New Hampshire to do a job and then go home.
Right. And so that those issues, if I had sort of a comfort level that with other candidates on that, I certainly wouldn't. I'm 71 years old. I'm an old guy, right?
But you're retired and you have vitality. You survived being dunked in the Merrimack River 50 years.
Yeah, even more important,
view.
I survived paddling down at least from Haverhill to draw attention to the CSOs and the near-death experience at the end of the river when a storm came in.
Well, you're a good person to talk about the river, Charlie, because you've survived these difficult.
Right.
Well, thank you very much for being on the presentation. This is Life Along the Merrimack. My guest has been City Councilor Charlie Tontar, who is thinking about running for mayor. Mayor holiday is up at the end of the fall. I am Dyke Hendrickson. I'm the host of the podcast, and we will be here next Tuesday at 2:00. Thank you very much. And Charlie, thank you very much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you, Dyke. Always good talking to you.
Good talking to you.
Bye now.
Bye now.